Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum friends. Welcome to Scholars Hive. I am Farzana Malik. फ्रेंड्स, आज की वीडियो में मैं आपके साथ जॉन मिल्टन की लाइफ हिस्ट्री और उनका वर्क जो है वो शेयर करूंगी। जॉन मिल्टन एक क्लासिकल पोइट हैं जो कि 9 दिसंबर 1608 में पैदा हुए। ये लंदन के रहने वाले थे और जॉन मिल्टन बेसिकली एक रिलीजियस फैमिली से बिलोंग करते थे। जॉन मिल्टन बिलोंग्ड टू ए रिलीजियस फैमिली। ही हैज़ कीन इंटरेस्ट इन हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट्स। वीडियो में आपको मैक्सिमम जॉन मिल्टन की लाइफ हिस्ट्री के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन मिले। I will try my level best to give you maximum information about John Milton in today's video, so keep watching and stay with us. John Milton life, birth and parentage. John Milton was born on December 9, 1608 in Bread Street, London. His grandfather Richard Milton was an ardent Roman Catholic and as such had disinherited his son, the poet's father, for his turning Protestant. The poet's father, whose name also was John Milton, settled down in London and gradually established himself as a prosperous law-stationer and moneylender. He was a man of learning and ability and had a great love for music. Not much is known of the poet's mother, but it is said that she was a woman of refinement and social grace, with a deep interest in religion and local charities. About the year 1620, Milton was sent to St. Paul's School for the first phase of his education. Here he studied not merely Greek and Latin but also Italian, French, and Hebrew. His headmaster, Alexander Gill, was an eminent scholar of ancient and modern literature. It was he who is installed in Milton a special fondness of Spenser. On February 12, 1625, just 6 weeks before Charles, Milton entered Christ's College, Cambridge, as a lesser pensioner. Milton was at this time a pleasing young lad of 17. He was a youth of middle stature, with unburned hair and oval face, with grey eyes, and an exceedingly fair complexion that earned him the nickname of the Lady of Christ. Milton himself later admitted that he was so nicknamed because he wouldn't drink like his schoolfellows. He studied at Cambridge for 7 years, taking his BA degree in 1628 to 29 and MA degree in 1632. He was by far too learned for most of his contemporaries, the majority of whom were destined for the church as an easy, gentlemanly living rather than from a sense of responsible vocation or duty. Milton's father had also sent him to Cambridge with the intention he should eventually qualify himself for the church and take orders. But before he left Cambridge, he was so much disgusted by the corruption among clergymen and the repressive policy of the Anglican Archbishop Laud that he determined not to accept holy orders. Milton said, "I thought it better to prefer a blameless silence." It was during these Cambridge years that Milton made his first experiments in poetry both in Latin and English. He showed remarkable skill in the Latin language and started writing Latin verse. It was subsequently observed by competent authorities that he was one of the first Englishmen who, after the Renaissance, wrote Latin verse with classical elegance. The English poems written during this period bear more relevance to the student of English literature. The first really great poem that he wrote during his period is the Ode on the Morning of Christ's Nativity. This was written in 1629 when Milton was only 21 years of age. Milton devoted himself heart and soul to the acquisition of knowledge in languages, literature, and scriptures, both modern and ancient. On every line that he has written in prose or verse, there is the stamp of his personality. Milton's character and personality may be defined in one word as lofty, a serious minded man. He drew inspiration for all his thoughts and actions from religion. It was his deep faith in religion and God's justice that prevented him from his lofty idealism and path of duty. His character was so lofty, his thoughts and ideas so pure, his learning so deep and wide, and his faith so deep that, like he was head and shoulders above his contemporaries. Milton lived a life of dedication. He had dedicated himself to the service of man and God. He performed all his life's work with the clear consciousness. His unshakable faith in God and divine justice made him strong. He had to suffer much in life. He lost his eyes, lost his hopes, lost his mental peace, and fell on evil tongues and evil days. Yet the hard rock of his faith was never shaken. God cast him into the furnace and weighted him in the balance, placed him in the whirlpool of danger to his life and honor, but he remained unshakable. In the words of Coleridge, John Milton is in every line of Paradise Lost. What though the field be lost, all is not lost, was the cry of his soul. The theme of Paradise Lost is the most extensive and the most universal. He has involved in his account of the fall of man. Paradise Lost is the paragon of all philosophy, metaphysics, cosmology, religion, and theology. In Paradise Lost, Milton displayed a beautiful blending of sublime thought and sublime expression. Milton's style was a grand style. Each of his major poems has a sublime theme. Milton's thoughts and sentiments are equally sublime. Milton suppresses ancient and the modern, the native and the foreign poets. Milton was great in sublimity of thought and expressions, in theme as in design, in conception as in imagination, in language as in style. All his major poetry has sublimity of the highest order. In all the poems of Milton we find his love of virtue and love of beauty. His Puritanism make his poems both lovely and dignified to his readers. He was a worshipper of beauty both in his conscious and spiritual aspects. Spencer and Plato taught him that virtue is the beauty of the soul. He was a dreamer of the beautiful in the world of nature and man. Ugliness and Milton were strangers to each other. Milton was upheld by two things, love of religion and love of fine arts. Of all the arts, he loved music the most. This taste for music he inherited from his father, who was a great musician himself. Milton was rightly called the God-gifted organ voice of England. A careful study of Paradise Lost would reveal the sources from which his imagination was fed. The classics of Greece and Rome, the Bible, ancient and contemporary history, travel, geography, scientific knowledge, politics, and interest in military matters, legend and fable all contribute to his store of learning. Milton was a great democratic and republican. He was the champion of the poor, weak, and fallen. He was a great advocate of human freedom and liberty. Milton's literary and intellectual life falls into three periods, each with a strongly marked character. First, from his birth to the conclusion of his education, from 1608 to 1638. This may be called his early verse period. Second, his political life, from 1638 to 1660, the year of restoration. The period contains all his prose writings. Third, his poetic life, from 1660 to 1674. This period contains all his greater works, on account of which it is rightly called the grand style. Milton introduces his three things: the use of slightly unfamiliar words and construction, the use of proper names, not solely nor chiefly for their sound, but because they are the names of splendid, remote, terrible, celebrated things. Third, contained allusion to all the sources of heightened interest in our sense experience: light, darkness, storm, flowers, love. We find the blending of Renaissance or Reformation elements in Milton's poetry. The Renaissance elements are as following: love of beauty, second, humanism, third, individualism, fourth, Christian humanism. Milton was a child of the Renaissance and Reformation. Paradise Lost is the product of Renaissance learning, Renaissance art and literature, and Renaissance philosophy and metaphysics. Humanism. A very important aspect of Renaissance was humanism. It asserted the essential dignity of man as man. Man had come to be regarded as the crown and roof of all creation, the measure of all things. Man was believed to be the center of all creation and all philosophy. The goal of life could be achieved not by the study of God, but by the study of man. Love of beauty. Beauty is central creed of the Renaissance. The Renaissance artists were great lovers of beauty, beauty of nature and beauty of the human form. They loved beauty in all its facts, sensuous, intellectual, and spiritual. Milton, though a Puritan, was a passionate devotee of beauty. Milton was one of the greatest leaders of the Reformation movement in England. He was a liberal Puritan. He grew up in a Puritan family whose parish priest was Richard Stock. Poetical offering to God. Milton's Paradise Lost is his poetical offering on the altar of God. A poet is an inspired mouthpiece of God. Milton believed that God had blessed him with that one talent, the poetical genius. In 1642, he wrote, "Poetical powers are the inspired gift of God, rarely bestowed." In Paradise Lost, Milton upheld and justifies the divine order. God is the supreme commander of the universe, under whose command there is a perfectly ordered universe with all its parts not only interconnected but properly balanced. Milton was a man of varied and powerful passions, in whom the joy of living and the sense of life's wonder and bounty were furious and strong. But with equal strength he believed in order and discipline. Image of vastness. The theme of Paradise Lost is justly in proportion to Milton's poetical powers. His subject to the fate of the world, the revolutions of heaven and of earth, rebellion against the supreme king, raised by the highest order of created beings, the overthrow of their host and the punishment of their crime, the creation of a new race of reasonable creatures, their original happiness and innocence, their fortune of immortality, and their restoration to hope and peace. The weakest of his agents are the highest and noblest of human beings, the original parents of mankind. Dr. Johnson's. Milton was also very fond of creating images of light and shade. Since he had gone blind, he had developed a keen longing for images of light. For several years preceding his blindness, while his eyesight had been steadily falling. One of Milton's most characteristic literary devices is his use of similes. Following the epic tradition, Milton frequently makes use of short and long similes to produce a number of effective severally or collectively. The theme he chose for his Paradise Lost was superhuman and supersensuous, which no human mind could directly conceive or comprehend. John Milton, Grand Style and Diction. Milton, according to Matthew Arnold, is the supreme master of the grand style. Defining the term grand style, Arnold says that the grand style is the style that arises in poetry when a noble nature, poetically gifted, treats with simplicity or with severity a serious subject. The grand style is therefore a harmonious blending of two elements, sublime thought and sublime expression. According to Arnold, the perfection of expression in every direction and kind, the commonly called great and the commonly called small, the tragic and the comic, the serious, the ironic, and even to some extent the terrible, not in the worst sense. In no other poet in the English language, not even in Shakespeare, do we find the grand style constantly present. Milton produces the grand style through certain well-marked linguistic and artistic devices. Style and diction. Milton's language of poetry is rather artificial and elaborate. He chooses every word with great care. He applies the principle of balance and emphasis. Every word in Milton's verse has its value in meaning and sound and demands the closest attention. His choice of subject has not a little to do with the nature of his diction. John Milton, Art of Versification. Milton's Paradise Lost is written in blank verse. It is the first English epic written in blank verse. Milton was a unique poet. He has enjoyed a reputation that has not been shared by any other poet in any language. Milton enjoyed little reputation in his own times. In fact, he was ignored, defamed, and even despised by a section of people. Paradise Lost brought him immediate recognition and a certain amount of fame. Milton's reputation as a poet grew surprisingly fast after his death. He came to be recognized as an institution and a Miltonic tradition was established. Many contemporary critics, scholars, and poets paid him glowing tribute on his death. His sublimity, grand style, musical quality, and epic similes made him a unique poet. Milton was a versatile scholar. Thus, Milton stands out as a unique poet. He has no parallels or superiors to him. As a poet, Milton is in a class by himself. He is the poet of all times, belonging to no one age or nationality. Milton had long been a patient of God. In his 66th year, it took a serious turn and proved fatal. On the 10th of November 1674, he quietly passed away at his house. He was buried in London beside his father's tomb.